Hi everybody, Adam here. So today I wanted to talk about the topic of coming up with good ideas for making blog posts, for making YouTube content, and so on. So a little bit of background about me. I've been blogging now for about a decade. I've gone through various levels of commitment throughout that entire process. At the height of things, I was posting twice a week very consistently. And then of course, the worst end of things, sometimes there have been times where I have been posting maybe once a month, maybe even less frequently than that. And that's all just been based on of course, the level of effort that I've been able to put in, the amount of time that I've had to put in posts regularly. In general, nowadays, I try and aim for a posting schedule of about once a week on the blog. Likewise, I have been starting on this YouTube channel, focusing on building it for about a year now. And during that time, I've also aimed for a similar consistency of about once a week. Obviously, that has also been a little bit up and down just based on how much effort I have to put into other things in my life. And of course, now that I'm doing both of them, I have to balance the effort that I am putting into the two of them. So of course, I don't have the energy to post twice a week on the blog anymore. But that means that I am, at the very minimum, trying to post either once on either the blog or the YouTube each week, and sometimes both. So the topic of today's video is simply, how do I get all those ideas? How have I been able to continue coming up with ideas in order to produce content for so long on such a regular basis? At first, I really struggled with coming up with ideas. That was kind of one of the big limiting factors in terms of me being able to get blog posts out. I would basically sit down in front of a word editor with the intention of writing something, and nothing would come to mind. It would just be a complete blank, no ideas would come in, and I would say, okay, what should I write about today? And I would have no idea, and nothing would ever work out. And then I might end up producing something that was kind of crap, that was kind of half-formed, wasn't really a good idea, and didn't really go anywhere. This is during that phase when I would maybe make one post a month, maybe less, because again, I simply didn't have good ideas, and I knew it, and it made me, in many ways, very ashamed of it. I was kind of very worried that people would not like the stuff that I was putting out. I was worried that I would get a lot of criticism for it. And I just was very nervous and anxious about putting myself out there. The reality is that you're generally not actually going to get much negative attention on anything that you ever create. Certainly that can happen. In the 10 years that I've been doing this, it hasn't happened to me very often. It's very rare that someone will really just hate something that you have created. Far more often, what's going to happen is simply that if you don't create something good, it's not going to get shared very much. People aren't going to resonate with it. People aren't going to see it. And it's just going to, it's just going to disappear into the void. It's not really going to go anywhere. In fact, basically the only time that I really have gotten a lot of negative attention on my work, I would say, is when I am actually doing advertising. And when you're doing advertising, of course, there are, pros and cons to doing advertising. One of the cons is that you are advertising your content to a lot of people who have never seen you before, who have no idea who you are, and they are a lot less likely to be nice to you, simply because, again, they don't know who you are, they don't really think of you as a person, they're much more likely to leave a mean comment or criticize you or whatever the case is. The reality is that when you're sharing content that's, say, being seen by your family members, the people that you know, the people that have already seen your blog and know what you write about, they're not going to be as critical because they have generally a better relationship with you. So I tried a lot of methods to actually remember ideas. At the time, I would do things where I'd have a really good idea while I'm out in the middle of the day doing something, doing my grocery shopping or just thinking about something. And I would have this flash of inspiration. I'd be like, oh, this would be a great idea for a blog post. And then I wouldn't write it down. And that was a problem because it meant that, okay, then I do sit down later in front of the computer to write something, and I just can't remember. I'm like, okay, I remember that I had this really good idea, but I can't remember what it was. And so what I realized was that if I wanted to actually be better at coming up with these ideas, I had to have some way of writing them down. This is also during a time period where obviously 2012 smartphones existed, but they were not nearly as, I would say, well established as they are today. At the time, I had a really crappy, it was like my very first smartphone. It had like 1 gigabyte of storage or something like that. I could barely fit just, all my social media apps on it, and that was it. And so, yeah, we had sort of the bare bones example of what a smartphone is back then, but it was a lot harder to just be like, oh, there's an app for everything now. So at the time, what ended up happening was, okay, I thought I'll try the pen and paper method. But it didn't really make sense to me. It didn't really work out for me because it felt really uncomfortable and weird to constantly be running around with, say, pen and piece of paper or whatever in your pocket, a little notebook, whatever the case is. Yeah, I would try and keep it on my person however I could, but when I was out running around doing personal training, doing my everyday stuff, it just wasn't convenient. There was no good time to just sit down and write down an idea, and it felt really awkward to be carrying it around everywhere I went. This is less of a problem, obviously, if you have maybe a more sedentary job where you sit in front of a desk all day. Okay, you've got a pad of paper there, right, there within reach at all times, so you can just write down an idea when you have it. But at the time, it wasn't really working out for me, and ultimately what I settled on was the fact that smartphones, again, nowadays, make things way easier. There are apps for writing down all kinds of things, and I prefer to use Google Keep, which is a very simple note-taking app. I've got now notes in Google Keep for all different sorts of things. I've got notes for fiction ideas. I've got notes for blog post ideas. I've got notes for YouTube ideas. And because that smartphone is always in my pocket, because I can always access that app, it makes it very easy for me to write down my ideas whenever I have them, and then I can come back to them later. And I'll be honest, sometimes even the ideas that I think are great at the time don't turn out to be great later. That's a normal part of the process. I'll write down a thought that I had, and I'll look at it a couple weeks later, and I'll go, I literally don't remember what I was thinking at the time. Why did I think this was a good idea? But the point is that you have that information there, you can recall it much more easily. And so now when I sit down in front of a word editor to actually write something, I'll say, okay, what am I going to write about today? I'll look through the 10 or so ideas that I have saved up at any given time, and I'll pick and choose, okay, this is the one that I want to write about today. This is also something where it actually helps to make the process much more fun, because since you have this whole list of ideas, I've got 10 different ideas, I can pick the one that I want to work on in any given day. That sort of prevents you from ever being in a position where, okay, I am now writing about something that I'm kind of not that enthused about at the time, and I'm not really sure how I'm going to make it work. You can basically just pick whatever you are most excited about at the time. That makes it actually really easy to get through a lot of writing, simply because then you can come back to other ideas later when you are feeling more passionate about those ideas, and that makes it a lot easier to actually just get through the process of writing, because you can pick and choose and focus on whatever is most important to you at any given time. So of course this raises another question, which is simply, how do you generate ideas? In general, I would say that I tend to have ideas most commonly when I am looking at other people's work, which is to say that I get most of my ideas when writing about fitness, when writing about self-improvement, when making YouTube videos, for example, simply when I am looking at other people making their own stuff. Because I see the stuff that they've created, I say, oh yeah, I agree with that, or oh yeah, I disagree with that. And why is that? I can now talk about why I agree or disagree with that. I can put out my own ideas. I can put out my own take out there into the world. So very often I find that actively consuming other people's content, other people's media, is precisely how I get ideas for how I could do it better, or how I could create my own version of this. So every morning I spend some time reviewing all the blogs that I follow, reviewing all the YouTube pages that I follow, and that tends to give me ideas over time, and then I write those ideas down, and those turn into, later on, my own content. You can also do things where you simply react to other people's content. That's a totally legitimate thing to do. Do a video where you react to somebody else's video, and then talk about why you agree or disagree with it. You can see that someone else has written a blog post of their own about, say, deadlifting, and you can write your own about why you disagree with it. Those are great ideas. Those always work, because those are just ideas that are based on the things that other people are already writing about, and by definition, there is some interest in. People are talking about, people care about it. If they see something that someone else has written because they care about that topic, and then you write about the same topic, you are also getting the benefit of the fact that that topic is something that people are interested in learning about. I like to use Feedly, feed.ly, which is a website that is basically a feed reader that makes it easy to follow a bunch of blogs at once. You import all the blogs that you follow, and it basically makes it very easy to just go to one page, check all the blogs that you follow, or the news sites, or whatever it is, and get a very quick rundown of all the new stuff that they have made each day. So I make sure to check Feedly pretty regularly. I make sure to check my YouTube page pretty regularly. And as a result, I get a lot of ideas sent to me pretty much daily, just because I am following a lot of people who talk about similar things to me. Another method that can work well if you already have an audience is simply polling your audience. Ask your audience what they want to see, because of course, if they say, hey, I want to see X thing, and then you write something or you make a video about that thing, there's a double layer of usefulness there. First of all, A, you're actually talking about a topic that people care about, and B, you're talking about a topic that a specific person cares about, and that specific person is going to feel good about the fact that you have talked about that, and they asked you to do it, and so that helps develop the connection between you and your audience. It makes you feel approachable. It makes you feel someone that people can come to when they have questions. You can be a good source of information on that topic. This can generate a bit of fatigue. If you're constantly doing things where you're demanding of your followers, hey, on every single social media site, hey, can you give me ideas? Then it's clear that that's not going to work out. You do need to do, of course, a mix of the ideas that are interesting to you and a mix of ideas that are interesting to your audience. If you are constantly writing about stuff that other people care about and not stuff that you care about, it's going to show. You are not going to have the same quality of work simply because you are not doing what is interesting to you. So I would say at the end of the day, you can pull people to get a good idea, but at the same time, there needs to be a limit. There needs to be a balance there. You need to balance working with your own ideas with working with ideas that other people have given you. There are also plenty of websites that are essentially designed for asking questions. So, for example, the website Quora is a place where people can go to ask questions about basically any topic at all. And realistically, a lot of these questions are not going to be very good questions, which is to say that a part of the process of getting better at any skill is also the fact that you know the kinds of knowledge that you need to know that you don't know yet. This is kind of a weird thing to say, but essentially people who are very, very much beginners don't know that they don't know. They don't know what knowledge they need to be focusing on in order to continue developing to become experts. And so they tend to ask the wrong kinds of questions. And so as a result, a lot of the questions that you find on a website like Quora will tend to be those sort of very beginner level questions where they're not really very good questions and they're not really questions that are going to be very useful to get an answer to. And then of course also Quora is a website where literally anybody can respond to any of those questions. Anyone with an account can make a question, anyone with an account can answer a question. And so of course as a result, many of the answers are also bad. So it sometimes happens where if you browse through the site a bit on one of the topics that you're interested in, maybe you do find a question here and there that is a good question. And maybe you do find that it has not been answered well at all by the people who have submitted to that site. And so, yes, that can be another good source as well. I would say that I kind of tend to use that as a last resort, where if I'm like really running out of ideas, I'm like, okay, I'm going to check Quora, or I'm going to check Reddit, or I'm going to check some message boards, but just to see what kinds of things people are interested in talking about, because again, it's kind of bottom of the barrel, but you may here and there find a good nugget that you can base a post around. So of course, this is a system that has worked really well for me. As I said before, I am now in a place where I constantly have about 10 to 20 ideas built up at any given time for anything that I want to write about, anything that I want to film a video about, anything that I want to talk about. And as a result, I'm never really out of ideas. Again, there may be times where I'm sort of scraping the bottom of the barrel. Maybe I've got 5 or 10 that are kind of the rejects, the leftovers that I'm not really feeling like talking very much about for the time. But that doesn't happen very often. All in all, in a general sense, I am capable of generating about 1 idea a week, and that means that that number that I have saved up remains pretty stable. And that's really all you have to do. You have to have 1 good idea a week. You've got 7 days to come up with 1 good idea. If you spend a few weeks passively coming up with good ideas and then writing those down, you'll probably have enough of a buffer that you can continue doing this essentially perpetually. Maybe not forever, but for very long periods of time. And I would say, just don't force it. If you're not having good ideas coming to you, then you shouldn't try and make content without a good idea. If all you've got are bad ideas and you know that they're all bad ideas, don't try and force it. Instead, simply wait around until you've got that necessary bank of good ideas again, or until you've got a good idea for a spin on what might previously have seemed like a bad idea before moving forward. I cannot emphasize enough that when I was in the very early stages of this process, when I was first starting out as a blogger, I would constantly think, oh, this is a bad idea, but I'm going to run ahead with it anyway. And of course, a lot of those bad ideas turned into very bad blog posts, which I am very embarrassed about and which I have since deleted. That's just sort of the way things go. That's, over time, you're going to get better at this stuff. You're going to be better and better at even, in many cases, transmuting bad ideas into good ideas. Or just taking something that maybe before you might not have been able to pull off, and this time pulling it off with flying colors. So it's certainly a skill that you will develop over time, but I would also simply say that once you've got that list of ideas built up, then the main thing to do, the limiting factor there, is no longer your ideas. It is simply your desire to continue putting in the work, to continue getting everything finished, to continue getting everything posted and getting it out there in the world. So hopefully this will help a lot of you remove the idea generation process as, that weak link in the chain. Hopefully this will help some of you develop your own blogs, develop your own YouTube pages. Very excited to see what you do in the future with this. So as always, I hope this has been helpful to everyone. Don't hesitate to like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you want to see in future videos. Give me free ideas for content, and I will see you all next time. Have a good week.